Hi, welcome once again to the Boulder Bookstore. I'm Arsen Kashkashian, the head buyer here at the store, and we're here to talk about some new books. And lots of stuff is coming out. The publishers have not stopped publishing, so new books are arriving all the time. I've got some paperbacks and some hardbacks here. I'm going to start with a paperback, David McCullough, The Pioneers. So many people know David McCullough for his great biographies he's done. For the BBS series he's done, where he's a talking head on the Ken Burns documentaries. This book is about the pioneers and the settling of the Northwest Territory. Now, in Colorado here, we think of the Northwest as being Washington and Oregon, but by Northwest, McCullough means Ohio, because that was the Northwest right after the Revolution. And kind of the U.S. pushing into the people in the United States, pushing into Ohio, kind of created a new kind of citizenship, a new world at that point. And he really gets into it here. It's a great book. It's great for Father's Day, which is coming up. So that's The Pioneers, David McCullough. And you can hear his voice in your head the whole time you read it. Andy Warhol. Now, if you want a big book about a kind of a remarkable artist, this is a great biography. The reviews have been wonderful. It's a deep dive into what Warhol meant culturally, what he meant artistically. He was kind of an amazing figure that went beyond the artwork that you had for him. He became a real cultural icon. And this book really gets into it, really parses what he meant and what his innovations were. Another paperback, Green New Deal and Beyond, Ending the Climate Emergency While We Still Can. And so the writer of this book is a plant scientist, and one of the things that he gets into is that the Green New Deal is really just a start. So as hard as it is to imagine that actually getting passed, that's the starting place, and then we're going to need to do much more. But he lays it out very clearly, concisely. It's a very well-written book that kind of really makes the case for why we need the Green New Deal, at least to start. Why fish don't exist. This is a remarkable story of a scientist around the turn of the century who had the largest specimen of fish that had ever been collected. He'd found like 20% of the species of fish. He discovered them. And the collection kept getting destroyed. The final time it was destroyed was in the San Francisco earthquake. And he would just painstakingly put it back together again. After the earthquake, he was able to reassemble it, but it's a great kind of scientific history tale, really interesting anecdotes, and there's beautiful illustrations in here, which I kind of like as a bonus, because I've never gotten past my love of children's books. So if I can have a page that has an illustration, I'm always very happy. Now the next book is Stephen King's If It Bleeds, and we actually have somebody here more qualified to talk about this than me. Actually, you probably have somebody more qualified to talk about every book in the store besides me, but I have somebody within 10 feet of me who's more qualified to talk about Stephen King. So I'm going to run away, and she's going to take my spot.
Hi, I'm Julia, and I'm apparently our resident Stephen King expert. I've read a lot of his books. He has a new one out, If It Bleeds. It's a set of 4 novellas, and I've read a lot of Stephen King books, and I find that his shorter fiction really shines. It really shows his strengths. So I've read the first story. I really loved it. I'm savoring it because you only get so many books by your favorite authors. So I highly recommend. At least the first story was fabulous. If It Bleeds by Stephen King.
I'm back, and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite authors who's not quite as well known as Stephen King. Percival Everett. Percival Everett is an African-American author who's been writing great books for about 30 years. Probably his most famous book is a book called Erasure that came out maybe 20 years ago, around 2001. This is his latest novel, Telephone. It just came out. It's in paperback. And there's kind of a couple different things. It's about a guy who's really struggling in his life. His beloved daughter has a genetic disease that's not going to get any better, so she's just deteriorating. And while this is happening, he gets mail-ordered clothing, and in the pocket of the clothing, instead of like one of those little things that says, this was inspected by so-and-so, it said, please help us, we need help. And so he actually investigates where the clothes came from and ends up in this kind of intrigue trying to save some workers. It's very interesting and well done, and Everett does a great job of really getting into the heads of his characters and in all their complexities, with all the different things that are going on in their lives. And finally, my wife said you may want to marry me. Some of you might have read in the New York Times a couple years ago a column by Amy Cross Rosenthal. She was dying of ovarian cancer. And this column appeared 10 days before she died. And she basically said, hey, you might want to marry my husband because he was such a great husband and I really want him to be happy in his life. And here's all his wonderful qualities and here's why he deserves to go on in life and be happy. It was a beautiful piece and one of the most read modern love columns that the New York Times has ever published. This is the husband's story now, 2 years later, where he talks about trying to get on with his life after Amy has died and what it's like to emerge from that grief and go on. And it's just a beautiful love story, and it's also a story of resilience and needing to go on in this world even in difficult circumstances. So I would highly recommend My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me. That's it for this week. We're doing curbside pickup. Give us a call, and hopefully we can get the book to you as quick as possible. Thanks a lot.